All right. One of the first things that attracted me to your work was your bio. I know that there's a lot of advice on social media and entrepreneurship to like put a very clear bio that attracts people. In my case, I was attracted to that because I come from a field of traditional education. And I know that you had something along the lines of transitioning from being a teacher into being an online writer. I'm curious why you made that move into more of an entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. Really appreciate you reaching out and asking me to join your podcast. So yeah, I used to work as a school teacher here at a public school in Germany, and I basically just followed the classic path that society laid out for me. So I graduated from high school and then just went to university, studied to become a teacher, and then basically just returned back to school. And that's what I did throughout my entire 20s. And the thing is, I have never really questioned that decision. So I saw my friends do that. A lot of my, like, not my parents, but some people in my family were also teachers. And I thought, okay, if they do it and teaching is a nice job, you get a decent salary, let's just go for that, right? But around the time when I hit my 30s, I started to really question my decision because I was asking myself, what comes next? So is there anything else that will, is there any other chance for me to climb the career ladder other than being just a teacher? And don't get me wrong, teaching is a very respectable job. But I always thought about like, okay, I want, is that everything that's in for me, right? So, and then I asked myself, do I really want to work in that job for 35, almost 40 more years until I can retire with, what is it, like 67 or so? And then it dawned on me that there is no way I will do the exact same job for 3 more decades. So I was always, really, I'm a very curious person. So I was always interested in learning new things. And yeah, about 2 to 3 years ago was when I decided, okay, there will come a time in my future where I will definitely quit teaching, and I will just now have to figure out what else I'm going to do in order to make some money. And what I ended up doing, especially right after the time I, quit my school teaching job, was I went all in on animation. And this is actually something that I still do up to this day. So I'm a freelance animator, and essentially what I do is I create animated explainer videos for companies, which means I, create these 60 to 90-second videos where I simply just explain their products or their services or just their business so that they can take these videos and put them on their website. And that's how I made my money during this transition time. I still do money that way today. But you brought up the thing with writing online, and that is also something that I started doing about 1.5 years ago, because one thing I love the animation stuff because it's like work that I can do on my own terms. I do not have a boss or anyone who tells me you should do this or you should do that. But the downside to freelancing is there are just so many hours in a day, right? And you can only animate so many videos per week or per day or per month or whatsoever. You're dependent on how many clients you get and so on and so forth. So I decided I want to get into a vehicle that gives me a bit more leverage. And then I fell in love with writing, or I actually accidentally, stumbled upon some tweets on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and I thought, oh, there are so many people who are writing online and they're making money from that. What can I do to learn this as well? So I started, getting into that topic, and as of today, I've been posting on Twitter or X for almost 13 months every single day. and now slowly building my writing business. So yeah, in a nutshell, it was from teaching in the classroom setting to breaking free, but just freelancing / animating, and now building an online writing business and building leverage.
It's the last word you just said, leverage. When you use that word, a lot of people probably don't even know what it means. Maybe there was a point where you didn't know what it means either. Could you just explain for people what leverage is?
100%. Yeah. And I'm still kind of learning that, because this such a, for some people, it's a complex construct. But once you kind of understand what it is in essence, you cannot really, you can't unsee it any longer. So leverage basically is, if you have an unleveraged business, you put 1 unit in and you get 1 unit out. Meaning, I put 10 hours into creating one video, creating a video, and get 1 video out. If I put in 20 hours creating animation videos, then I get 2 videos out, and so on and so forth. And the idea of leverage is that you have the same input, let's say 10 hours, or let's take 1 hour maybe, 1 hour of input, but you do not just get 1 unit out, you get 2 units out. At some points you get 3 units out or 4 units out. And in a sense of writing online, it's the idea of let's just break it down, or let's use the simplest kind of thing that we can think of is like a tweet. You can post a tweet, which takes me like a minute to write, and it has the potential to reach thousands of people. And that, to me, is the beauty of leverage. I can do the same input, but the output can be like 10x, 20x, or even 100x. Yeah, that's, to me, is leverage.
Just for fun, do you think that you'll stop using the term tweet?
Oh my God. I think we could discuss about that topic probably forever. I don't think so. We had this, I had these conversations with lots of other creators in the writing space. And I haven't found anyone who's completely all right with calling it X. And I'm just gonna post an X, or I'm just gonna post a post, because it just sounds silly. So I feel like everyone, myself included, will still use the word tweet because it just sounds cooler, and that's where it all started, right?
I agree. I've chimed into some of those threads and conversations, and I think my take has always been that, well, for one, until the actual URL changes, because they still use twitter.com in many ways, that will be a big difference. But also, it's still pretty young, the idea of X in general. Once more and more users come on and that's actually all they know, then things may start to shift a tinier bit. But the same language around being able to tweet something versus X something, I don't think that's going to be happening anytime. But anyhow, that was kind of a sidebar. But when you started getting into this idea of figuring out leverage, deciding to do things that are a little more scalable, and like you said, put 1 unit out, hope to get multiple out in the future, what resources or like learning experiences did you come across that led you doing that? Or did it all just happen in your own brain?
No, it didn't just happen in my brain. I think at the very start, I just consumed tweets of other creators. So like for the people in your audience who are like a little bit familiar with the niche, there are people like Kieran Drew, there are Justin Welch, Nicholas Cole, Dickie Bush, and they are like really popular and Denko maybe also. They're really popular in the online writing niche. And at the very start, and I wasn't even creating at that point, I was simply consuming their tweets and getting inspired by them, because these like guys, they were also just starting out to write online a couple of years ago. And they did not learn that at school. They did not learn that at college or university. So I felt kind of inspired by their story. And the more I read about them and their stories, the more I kind of, went down that rabbit hole. And well, the idea of building an online business basically is that you grab attention on social media, you funnel people to your email list, and then at the end of the email list, there's like usually an offer. And that's what I did also. So I pretty much consumed all of these people's courses and masterminds and subscription services. So I kind of really went all in on educating myself on these topics. So I started as kind of like free education, but I realized when I really want to, make big moves forward and to really become a master in this craft of writing, I really need to put some money on the line. And I can tell you, whenever I like really paid for stuff, both courses, but also really let's say coaching calls with like people like Kieran Drew, for example, I really felt that the more money I spent on myself and on my self-education, the better I got right afterwards. So that's basically how it went from, just consuming free stuff to buying some low ticket courses up to, I'm paying lots of money to get coached by people I look up to.
It's quite an interesting thing because right now in the world of online education, just to think of that term specifically, online education or online learning, there's this whole idea of like, is this public schools that are posting things online? Is this a school like Harvard or IDEO at Stanford that are creating lessons for anyone in the world just to be able to watch? Or are these people building niche solopreneurship kind of micro businesses and monetizing their audience? And all those three things kind of get blended into this term of online education. I think people like you and I who have the experience of going through that and actually paying for things know that there is a lot of value in it. You referenced Dan Koh. I know that he's someone that talks a lot about the idea that people underestimate how much value it can bring. And there's this sort of debate around the idea whether or not courses should be free, cost money, or be anywhere in between. And it's something that I struggle with as a creator as well. I'm wondering, it sounds like you get value out of it, but as an overall topic of where online education is heading, what's your take on that with someone with an actual education background?
Generally, I would say that you will find everything that you want to know for free on the internet. Like the information is out there. You can look up, you can just watch videos on YouTube. You can scroll Twitter forever, or just go to any popular websites and you will find all the information. So yes, I'm absolutely convinced that education should be free. However, when it comes to courses, to online courses that are paid, I believe their big advantage is the packaging. So let me give you an example about my story. So I wanted to, or I actually still do, want to master writing online. So I want to know everything that's connected to that big topic. It would probably take me a lifetime to go and check out all the resources that are out there, the free ones. But what I did instead, and this is what I see as an advantage to paid products, is I just looked up the successful creators in that niche and checked out, okay, what paid offers do they have? Because essentially what a paid offer is, it's like a bundle or a package of information. The information you can find for free on the internet, but when you want to have packaging, when you want to have speed, and also when you want to have some form of accountability, and I think this is oftentimes really underrated, when you want to have accountability, it's better to pay for products. And also what you will find is that there are lots of different price points. You can get a world-class product that will teach you a skill you can use to make, I don't know how much money for less than $100, right? Will it hold you that much accountable compared to, let's say, someone who's coaching you for $1,000 a month? Probably not. But there are different price points when it comes to education online. And so essentially, I think anyone can start with educating themselves on the internet for free. But from my experience, at some point, when you want to be serious about it, or when you want to, turn pro in a sense, then it's a good idea to pay for it.
I've always felt like there's some positive karma to like putting credits into the creator economy as well, because I know that they'll come back in some way, shape, or form. I just bought a membership for the month of July, and I told her straight up, like, I don't know how much I'll be able to be in there. I don't know that I'll learn a lot because I've taken a very similar course before from an expert, and this is her first time running one in this case. But I do want to support you, so I'm going to come purchase your course. And in that case, it was like the extreme version of wanting to be supportive. The interesting thing is, though, I will say, the part that I have been pleasantly surprised to get out of it is a little bit of accountability. And that's because it's a membership that was launched to help people write their first book. When the membership even started, I was already halfway done writing my book, and I had learned from quite a few experts, both for free and paid, over the last little while before starting to write my book. So it was really just a decision to want to be supportive of her work as a friend. And I've found myself maybe justifying purchases at times for similar reasons, because I'm like, well, even if I don't get anything out of this, at least I'm supporting the creator economy. And again, people who have never done this would probably think that that sounds like a crazy waste of money. But it also makes me think of a previous life of mine where I was a personal trainer, and people would come in on day one and spend, $5,000 to work with me. And I never for a second thought that that was too much money, because I knew with the accountability and the like very specific customized plans that we were going to work through, that they were going to have life-changing experiences over the next, 3 to 6 months. But I do find myself struggling a little bit with monetizing in the creator economy versus that personal training thing for some reason. And it's less about the overall belief that money can bring value and more about my inherent belief that education should be somewhat free. And so that's a really interesting thing that I'm, I guess, studying right now and trying to learn more and more about, but less so a question and more a thought out loud. I think it's a really interesting time because things will shift a little bit with AI and whatnot, to your point that everything will exist for free, but it still makes sense to pay for packaging to a certain extent,
100%. And what you brought up, the example with personal training, I think it's a great example because what you could have done is you could have given that person who paid you $5,000, you could have just given her like a list of, I don't know, 10 links or something, or 10 YouTube videos. Even like 10 workouts that you have even done yourself and put on YouTube or whatever, and say, do that for 6 months every single day. Buy these groceries and do that for whatever time, and you will get the result. And you could have done that for free. And but the question would have been, that person didn't pay for the information or the things that you told her or him. That person paid you for the accountability. And I guess that is such an underrated thing, both in in the fitness world, in writing, essentially everywhere where it's this where there's some kind of coaching aspect to it. No matter if it's one-on-one or one-to-few, but especially with one-on-one, it's for me, it's reasonable to ask for higher prices because the accountability is at its highest when you work with someone like one-on-one. And yes, you do kind of educate them in a way, but it's more the accountability that is kind of the reason why this can be so expensive, in my opinion.
There are two other helpful overlaps to that part of my life too that could probably help people a bit. And one of those is the idea that people would often want to work together for like a week or something like that. And because I was quite oversubscribed, to use a business book term, I was able to say, no, I work with people like for 6 months. That's it. And I work with them at least a few times a week because I want to put my name on a guarantee that you will succeed with these goals. I think in online writing, we could get people pretty brushed up if they went full time in a matter of weeks. Of course, it takes experience to get really good, but you could learn quickly. With changing your body, if you're 100 pounds overweight, it's like, we're going to need a bit of time here for you to feel like, oh yeah, I'm really noticing some positive changes. So commitment is another, kind of word that comes to mind. It's funny that you said that I could have given them links as well, because something that I did do that I didn't even realize was maybe like a good business move looking back. I was like 20 years old, but was anytime that someone would decide not to become a paying client and join that long-term subscription, I would gift them a book. And there was two in particular, but one of my favorites was called The Women's Guide to Weightlifting, I believe. It's one of the best. It like combines nutrition and wellness and sleep, but with also some exercises you could do if you're at home or a hotel, but you could also do them at the gym. It has different levels, and it's the ultimate guide to weightlifting for women. That's what it's called. And I would gift that to people. I don't remember if it was $40 or $50, but I would just give it to them. And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, this is all you need to succeed in this book, whether or not you will do it. And it wasn't even a passive aggressive move. It was just being generous. And a lot of times those people would come back around.
I was just about to ask. Yep.
Yeah, and they would become clients. And I've brought that up on the show as well with Justin Friestad, who's like a real sales expert. And I shared with him the story too, that people used to ask me to go talk at sales conferences, went back again 20 years ago, because I was setting sales records. And I was like, I don't even know what the hell I would say, because all I do, and now I've read all the business books, right? And I'm like, oh, that's what I was doing. But I came about it somewhat naturally, probably more so accidentally, because I had such a good product market founder fit, right? Like fitness, improving your body, your nutrition, all of that was so intrinsic to me that I wasn't having to like look up like how to help someone learn how to work out. And like, I wasn't having to scramble. I was able to be the expert, but then more so because of the actual specific knowledge, we would make changes, like huge success stories. And then all of a sudden when people see that, they want that too. And so I think that's like just a great metaphor. Fast forward 20 years as I figure out this creator economy instead. But looking back, I'm able to connect those dots and be like, oh yeah, those were the things I was doing.
Yeah. It's always easier to connect the dot in retrospect. And whenever I listen to podcasts from people I look up to, and they can tell their story, it's always easy to kind of see how they did things during their time. Whereas in reality, back when they started, they hadn't figured anything out. And this is, by the way, also a lesson that I learned now that I'm, in this online writing business for some time. No one has it all figured out, and everyone is still learning on the way. And this is true for me. This is true for you and everyone who's listening. And especially for the guys who are way ahead of us. And it's just such a nice kind of a nice thought, because we always think that we need to be an expert to do anything, but whether it's personal training or writing online or whatever. But really, it's just the idea of you have to start to become great, and you do not have to be great to start. I love that line.
I do love that. And we were talking a little bit before about some of the experts that you've learned from, people you look up to. And I know offline we were chatting a bit about Talon Simmons, who's become a friend over the last year or so. And, if you go to that episode and to the very last topic that we touch on, it was on the idea of trying to like stay mentally healthy while we pursue these goals. And I think that's the other thing that I love how Naval says. He says that health and wellness are things that you always have to work on. It doesn't matter how much success or how much money you have, you always have to work on those things intrinsically. And I think our problems are relative. And a lot of people, especially young people, teenagers, like, kids like we used to teach, they think that once they get somewhere, then they'll feel better. And I know that can be hard to a certain extent because, like Maslow's hierarchy, you need your needs met. But once your needs are met, the game's pretty damn similar in from there up, because it's like someone who's making $1 million a year on their writing could be really struggling with their marriage or substance use or something. And you don't get to see behind the scenes to those things. I think that's a really powerful part of it as well.
And with that respect, I love how Naval talks about playing status games versus playing wealth games. And well, from my experience, a lot of people who want to play status games, like chasing money, chasing followers, or buying that new Porsche, or whatever, oftentimes tend to be more mentally unhealthy, because no matter how much money you have, there will always be someone who has more money than you. No matter what big of a car you drive, there will always be someone who has a bigger car, or followers, or whatever, or the weights that you bench press, right? There will always be someone better. So the idea of playing status games is something that I've really thought about a lot, like playing status games compared to playing wealth games. I'm a big fan of playing wealth games because if you're like not doing it to compare yourself to others, it makes it so much, like the entire journey will be so much easier for you, because it really doesn't matter what kind of niche you play in or what profession you have. If the only kind of comparison you make is the one to your past self, you will always find that you are making progress. And I found this thought to be so fulfilling. And it really, for me, also made the difference why I would never feel stressed about my current state, or why I'm not having that many followers right now, or not making as much money right now, because I just think about, where have I been last year? And then I feel, or even like last month. And then it dawns on me, all right, last year at that time, I have maybe had like 100 followers or something. And now I passed like thousands by far, and learned so much, and have so many great opportunities, like talking on this podcast and so on and so forth. So this is really how I think about it. Like, do not play status games, because they're the ultimate way to, feeling stressed and mentally unhealthy.
There's a strategy part to it as well, for the people who like to be at least somewhat competitive, not necessarily with others, but again, the UVU mentality. And maybe you're there already, maybe you'll be there. I think we all get there in different cycles, but it's the fact that we can learn from others who have done things before us. And then very shortly after that, there's a very difficult dip where we're like, oh, not everything that they do works for me. And you have to figure your way through this, kind of like being a mouse in the maze. Your walls are in different places than theirs were, and you have to pivot and back up and go a different direction than they did. And I definitely went through this. I take someone's online course on something like how to podcast, and then I'm trying to follow their blueprint because they're a hero of mine, not recognizing that in their journey, they didn't have a blueprint. They were having to figure certain things out that were unique to them. That's another thing that ties into this stuff that everyone goes through. And sometimes we can be blindsided by it.
I love that. I love that idea, because it reminds me of something I learned from Alex Hormozi. He talked about that in one of his videos. The reason why most online courses won't make you successful is because we assume that just by consuming an online course, maybe about how to be a world-class podcaster or how to make money online, that there are all the unique lessons we need to know inside, which is complete nonsense. So what he kind of did, he painted this mental picture. I'm trying to do the same right now. So imagine you want to build a bridge and you're on the one side and you want to get to the other side, and therefore you will have to build that bridge. When you consume an online course, it basically just means that you have one brick, and with one brick you usually cannot cross that bridge. What that means is you will need to create those other bricks. It can be by consuming other courses. It can be by getting some coaching, or by just reading books. So basically, the idea of not relying on one single resource by one individual creator to kind of get all the answers is a really nice way of, thinking of, okay, I want to build my bridge from where I am right now to where I want to go. And therefore I just need more than one single resource, because that resource, just as you said, was made by this other person who had the different circumstances and a different background, and also maybe different goals than mine. So yeah, it's nice to think about that. And I just wanted to have a quick question to you, because you said UVU framework. Could you just expand on that again? Because I found it interesting.
Yeah, I wish my friend Kenny still had his business. I think he closed the actual business, but that's what it was. It was a U, a V, and a U. So that's why it rolled off the tongue so quickly. But it was a gym, a fitness center, and it was U versus U was what it stood for. And so the whole idea that at any moment when we're really comparing ourselves to others, I have a pretty good habit of not scrolling on social media. Yet even still, I can have these like pangs of jealousy of like people who are further ahead of me on their journey, things like that at any moment we can return to that ability to like run your own race, so to speak. And another time that it comes up, you kind of referenced it, the idea that if you think back to your problems a year ago, or not necessarily problems, but you mentioned having 100 followers a year ago and now having 1,000, like that. When we do go back in time, as long as we're comparing ourselves to ourselves, it's very, very, very rare that you haven't made progress. Like, it's extremely rare. Of course, we have setbacks, we have failures, but ultimately, and that's the whole theme of the show, just keep learning, you're going to be moving forward. The other way that I like to look at it, that I've had some success explaining to people, and usually I get to draw it as well, is like the stock market. Any stock, like you look at big ones, things that I've owned in the past, like Pinterest or Shopify or Amazon. Tesla is probably a good example. You could go down the list of the ones that have huge dips, but then they climb back. Huge dips, and then they climb back. And it's not necessarily fully translatable to creator economy or, becoming a musician or something, but I think it is when you just look at the picture of it, how there's ups and downs, but over time, you're consistently going up and to the right.
100%. Always, this is one of those first principles that I use whenever I encounter any kind of mental roadblock, limiting belief, or just anything that I struggle with. It's to zoom out. And you brought up the example with the stock market. It's a great example. If you kind of really zoom out and look at the S&P from like 1920 to 2020, it's like this huge increase in percentages. And like when we look at our personal lives, we cannot really put percentages on that. Like we had like a yield of, 10% per year or anything. But it's really the same. Like, I think this is also hopefully a very valuable tip for anyone listening, that whenever you kind of find yourself in a slug or feel just not as if you were moving forward or making progress, it's always great to just zoom out. And then you will quickly find, not just zoom out by a week or by a month, but really like by a year, by 5 years or 10 years even. Depends on how old you are, obviously. But I found that anytime you will slowly start to realize, oh shoot, I have done a ton of progress, and where I am today is far from where I have been a few years back. So yeah, that always gives me some form of relief when I, just zoom out and have a look at the bigger picture.
Now, you brought up online courses, learning from some of those people ahead of you. Uh, of course, there's a lot of IP in there. Perhaps there are some sorts of secrets, etc. We can't summarize everyone's course and share anything and everything. Although, a little side note, there's a bit of a myth there. I think a lot of creators appreciate people sharing their work. And that's another funny thing that a lot of people think like, oh, there's this paywall there, there's this gate. So I'm not allowed to know like one thing that Ty Lopez says in that course on e-commerce. And like, even he would laugh at that and be like, it doesn't matter. Like, again, to your point, you're paying for the packaging, the accountability, the ability to go through it. So I don't think we're ruining anyone's life by sharing some secrets, especially if we put their affiliate link in the show notes. But you mentioned that you started kind of working up that ladder of investing in yourself, taking some courses from other people. Everyone's takeaways are probably unique. As an online writer or business leader in the creator economy, what are some of the big learnings that you had from those courses?
Oh man, where should I start? Like, there are so many things I could think of right now. I guess one of the most important learnings I had was that writing online is so much different than writing at school. And when you want to get into online writing, you will have to unlearn a lot of the things that you learned at school at first. And to give you one example, like one big takeaway, or yeah, it's really like a takeaway, is to try and write like you were having a conversation with a friend, or write like you speak. So if I think back to my days when I was both a student and later on a teacher, I would have never said that to my students, and I would have never, like when I was a student, written in a way that as if I were talking to you right now. It's no jargon, all those filler words, start sentences with but or and. Because teachers hate that, because they want it to sound like super complex and jargony and all that stuff. But what any online writer who's ahead of me has taught me was to really write like you talk. Unless you swear, then I'm not a big fan of swear words, obviously. So you should try and avoid that. But other than that, that was one great takeaway. Another one I would say, and this is where also most people go wrong in my opinion, is they share too little about themselves. Because especially with the rise of AI over the last 1.5 years now, I could create a thread about the 10 best productivity tips in 5 seconds. Or 10 seconds, and I could post it and nobody would pay attention, because the market is so saturated with these generic advice, right? You see generic advice everywhere. And one of the big things that I've learned is that if you want to stand out online, you have to share something about yourself. You have to share some parts of your story. So that's the reason why every now and then I just talk about like my years as a teacher and what it's like now to write online. But I also talk about the things that I believe in. In the writing sphere, we call these strong beliefs or unpopular opinions, meaning that you should not just say what everyone says, but you should have strong beliefs to kind of either pull people into your world or repel them from you, because that's just a great way to stand out from the crowd. Because if everyone's giving you the same platitudes and everyone's telling you the same generic advice, there's no chance that if you did that, there's no chance that you can actually stand out from anyone else. So I guess that's another great takeaway, to really bake in your personality in your writing and do not make it generic. And I'm a big fan of threes. So I'm going to give you a third thing, third big takeaway. um, and I guess, yeah, this might sound like the opposite of what I just said before. But when you write online, you must always make it about your reader. And I said before that you should write about your own story and like your own personal views and stuff. And that's right. But in every piece of content that you write, either that doesn't matter if it's short form or long form or like newsletters or whatever, at some point you will have to bring it back to the reader. And the guiding question is, what's in for me? Like your reader will always ask him or herself, what's in for me when I read your email or your short form post, or even when I watch your videos, or even when I listen to your podcast. They will always ask themselves, what's in for me? And your job as a writer, and I assume this also applies to podcasting and video, is to bring it back to them. And really, it's a buzzword, but to provide value to the other person. And when it comes to, for example, when it comes to telling your personal story, a nice way of doing that is always to end your story with a lesson for the reader. Hey, I was there. Now I am here. By the way, here are the lessons I can share with you. I hope they will help you too. They have helped me. I will hope they will help you too. And voila, you have kind of told something about yourself, but made it about the reader. So yeah, I guess these are my big three takeaways.
I'd hate to ask you to go to 4 if 3 is one of your favorite numbers and you like doing things in trios. That should be part of a brand or a company you build someday, or maybe it already is. But no, that's really helpful stuff. I think those types of like wise nuggets are things that people can just take away and apply to their own work. The other thing that is tough online for people listening to this, even you already would have some cursive knowledge as an online writer. Like, yes, you look up to like a Kieran Drew or Dan Coe, but even already you would be advanced to someone who's sitting there a few years ago, like you were listening to this episode for the first time. We would already be getting to the point where it's like, could be maybe starting to get a little bit complicated. I think the thing that people listening as well start to do is think like, oh, maybe I'll go take one of those online courses. So you quickly name dropped some of them before. And again, we don't have to like call people out or rank order them per se. But if someone were to be, you run into them at a bus stop or something and you tell them, well, this is how I got into online writing, kid, and then, oh, well, what course did you take? And you just kind of gave them like, here's what I really liked about this one. So if you want this, take that one, or maybe you could rank order them, or just mention like what your favorite one was. I'll kind of leave it with you. But if you were to kind of give a testimonial right now for where people could go to learn themselves, if they're ready to invest, what would your thoughts be?
Well, I can tell you which one I would choose. And I can also give you the reason why I'm saying this. I would definitely pick the courses by Kieran Drew. He's a British writer. He's been writing for about like 4 years now, almost 4 years on Twitter. He's also on LinkedIn, but his kind of main playground is Twitter. And there's just something about this guy. He's so funny, but he's also very knowledgeable. And he also had a completely different background. So he didn't work as a teacher before, but as a dentist. And that was one of the reasons why I felt so connected to him, because as I said, if you share your personal story online, there's a higher chance for people to connect with you on a personal level. And I kind of dove into his world about a year ago and just started consuming his free content. Just like I told you before, I started reading, his long form posts and short form posts on Twitter. Then I began reading his emails. Then I bought his first course. Then I also had coaching calls with him. And so for people who want to kind of get into writing online, there are lots of courses out there, but I feel like his course, and it's called High Impact Writing, is one of the best resources that you will find. And I'm not just saying that because, and this is the side story I wanted to just tease real quick. I'm not just saying that because I have now started actually to work with him, which is really cool. But it's also because there are few really good writing products out there. I could name a few more, but I feel like when it comes to just the skill of writing, I don't know any other product that is as both information dense but also high quality produced like his course.
That's definitely the reputation it has. I've taken that course, so I agree as well. I
Oh,
would give it a thumbs up and a testimonial for sure. And I actually don't think I had taken any of the others that you mentioned. So that was quite serendipitous that's the one that you did
funny.
choose. Yeah. And so you mentioned that when you were in school that you wouldn't have necessarily taught writing that way. It made me think of writing I was doing minutes before we logged on to this. Because like I said, I've been working on my book and I wrote, whenever I hear the Logic's Black Spider-Man, I think how wonderful a world this would be if we could just be who we want to be. And I had want there first, WANT, who we want to be. And I was like, this just doesn't roll off the tongue. And I just backed it up and put WANNA. And my editor, I was picturing my editor in my head being like, this might be a funny conversation, but this one's not leaving.
Dude, back in school, when I had to check the exams of my students, I had many of them use slang. And there's this one word that it's so popular in like spoken language. It's this the kind of combination of the two words kind of. So it's not kind of the same, but it's kinda with an A at the end, right? So it's slang. And my students actually used to use that in their academic texts. And I read that and I felt like I would definitely say it the same way like you, but it's just not the way it's supposed to, look like. So I have to kind of underline this and mark it as a mistake, which is stupid, like looking back. But that's just if you have to operate in a system where it says, hey, by our definition, this is a mistake, which will lead to a minus point or whatever. You have to work that way. But yeah, it's funny how different those two worlds are.
Very different. And that's why I'm excited about this book, because it's a longer story as to why I started working on it and this topic in particular, but it mostly relates back to my journey in figuring out online writing while still being in school as an educator. And that's an interesting piece too, because I would have these moments on the daily, right? Like I could be reading an email newsletter from Dan Coe in the morning, go to a school and be helping this kid with their paper. And I'm like, this is going to be so hard to explain. You're going to want to submit it to your professor like this. But if you're wanting to write this for the real world, do it like this. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? But some of them could wrap their minds around it. And the way I did that was we would split things up. So they would have like a pile of work for submitting to their professors or teachers. And then I would also have them writing on Medium and practicing like writing on the website Medium so that they could kind of play in those two worlds, and they're just so different. Like you're not having a 5-paragraph essay with, those very prescriptive sentences and frameworks and outlines that the teacher, and in fairness, the teacher doesn't know any better either. So they're just marking it based on, their own experience and their own bubble. But then explaining to them like, I would put a line break here. And they're like, it's only one sentence. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But it's somewhat of a full thought enough that you want someone to breathe before they go to the next line. And like explaining it a lot more like poetry. And it certainly wasn't easy, but trying to figure out how to explain that to them actually, like, go figure, teaching helps our own learning, really helped me get even better as a writer. And so that's when I started working on this book. I realized I should maybe, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I should maybe, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, I should maybe, 11 years ago, count them for fun. I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of books behind me on the shelves. And I'm a pretty avid reader. And when I was doing some research for this book, I was realizing that youth want to read right now, even though there's YouTube and there's TikTok and there's all these different options out there. They do enjoy picking up a physical book, but they'll pick up a book from like Glennon Doyle's like Untamed, or even The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck from Mark Manson. Fun story of mine. I got to sit and ask that guy about book marketing for like 10 minutes, just the two of us, which was, that was a pretty cool moment. But even that book is somewhat traditional enough that they get bored by it. And so, and it's also a little bit disconnected, right? Like the topics and that kind of stuff. So what I'm trying to do is basically that self-help, that personal development genre that, you know, a byproduct maybe that adults appreciate it too, but really, you know, it can be for teens and it'll flow a little more. And the funny thing is, and actually large part why I took a course like Kieran Drew's, is the style of writing doesn't show up much in traditional books right now.
That's right. That's right. As you were talking about that, it reminded me of the formatting, which is essentially what you were touching upon, the formatting between school writing and like modern writing, whether it's online or for you when you write your book. And I still remember from my teacher days that students would hand in, and they would see this as completely normal. They would hand in a full written piece, like a page fully written without any line breaks, like a wall. I always called it like a wall of text. And you just stare at that page and you can really feel that that no part of your body wants to read that right now, because it's just like, it just doesn't look good. And that's what I like so much about writing online. The formatting is so entirely different than the way we were taught at school. And just as you said, like, like most books actually look like, and it can really make a huge difference to how we perceive the ideas in the text, just how they look like. It sounds kind of crazy in a way, but I definitely made that experience that if a text is arranged well and formatted it well, it just looks more pleasing to the eye, and it's more enjoyable to read. But before you talk so much about your own book that you're writing right now, I'm super curious. Is it like a self-help book for for teenagers or for young adults? Would you, or is it still a secret that you can't talk about?
I'm a big believer of building in public. I think there would be very few secrets that I would ever keep, unless I had like a really good book title or something. Maybe I would keep that, but I could still share the subtitle. So the short answer is it would fall into that self-help personal development category. And yes, if I picked a genre to like create my own category for it, it would be self-help for teens. About 12 years ago, I really wanted to do this, and I created a nonprofit with a fellow teacher friend of mine, and she and I had our students create like their own stories. So it was like the books Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's a huge brand where people submit their own writing. It gets compiled in books, and there's like, I don't know, 1,000 of them now. So it was more of that, like everybody submit your own writing. And we actually took it global, and youth from all over the world submitted their writing for us to compile into one book. I remember going into our local bookstore and taking a picture of the two sections in the bookstore to explain why I wanted to do this. I think being teenagers is one of the most important time in our lives to figure all this stuff that we've been talking about for the last 55 minutes. To figure these things out is one of the most important times that we need self-help and personal development. Yet there's so little out there. The section for personal development and self-help at the bookstore I was at is like 3 aisles long, like 20 feet wide and 10 feet high. and they have a little tiny corner in the bottom right of the graphic novel section in the young adult teen section that says self-help. And it's like the books are terrible too. Like they're so like I couldn't see, I don't know a teen who would pick one of those up and read it. There's a few that are good, like How to Win Friends and Influence People for Teens is a good one. A Teen's Guide to Total World Domination is a good one. Brainstorm by Dan Siegel is boring because it's written by a doctor, but it's not bad. Anyways, to answer the question, like, yes, teen self-help. But one thing that I learned about niche that has been really helpful to me is that we can create an ideal reader, an ideal listener, and an ideal viewer on YouTube. We can hold them in our minds. We can write the demographics, the psychographics, the identity of who that person is. We can picture them when we're writing, but then we don't have to put on the cover, just keep learning book for teens. Like that's not going to exist. So I'm thinking of them when I'm writing it. I really trust that it'll be for anyone that wants to read it, who is going through some form of goal setting or identity transformation. Like when you first started thinking about leaving teaching to go into writing, that would be a great time to pick up this book.
I get that, and it's funny that you picked this niche or this category of self-help and personal development, because when I think back, like really 4 years ago, that's when my kind of self or personal development journey actually started. And it was long before I decided that I want to quit teaching. It was really the time when I'm trying to think of the first book that I ever picked up on this topic. I think it was just thinking about the English title, to be honest. It's the Cafe at the End of the World by John Strzelecki. You know this one?
No,
it's I'm not sure if that's the original title, but it's John Strzelecki. It's a super famous book, and it's really small. It's like you can read it in like 2 or 3 hours, but it's such a fascinating story of someone. I think it was like a burned out manager who meets someone like a guide in this cafe at the end of the world, and this guide actually asks him questions like, hey, where do you actually want to go in life, and what's holding you back from it? And they're having this conversation. It's such a nice, lovely little book. And I read this for the first time, and I really remember the time when I finished that. And I was still like 2-3 years into my teacher journey. It was this moment when it kind of started to, am I really doing the thing that I want to be doing like forever? Is that maybe now my moment of things are about to change? And like looking back now in retrospect, yes, it was when it slowly started changing. And that's coming back to self-help books. That was the moment when I started picking them up. I read like How to Win Friends and Influence People. By the way, I didn't know that there was a kids version of that. How cool is that? And all these other like, oh man, I can't really see the books behind you, but I would assume that I've read like a big bunch of them myself. So yeah, it's like self-help books are a great resource for really kind of helping you figure out where you want to go. The only kind of difficulty that I see with lots of people is that they don't find the time when it's, when they should stop consuming and start taking action. And you're nodding because you're probably familiar with that as well. And I kind of fell into that trap. At some point, I was asking myself, okay, that was really inspiring what I just read. And that person, that author actually gave me lots of action steps, which I could execute now right away. But you know what? I also heard this book is quite good. So maybe I'll just read that one and then I'll get going. And I don't know if that resonates with you, but this is kind of like the trap I see with this whole self-help or personal development niche. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I was nodding and smiling because it was also today that I was doing some writing and I was sharing my thoughts on the ideas when it comes to learning and two things that we should be doing that, again, I learned the hard way. That's the other thing about this book. There are going to be so many nuggets from this episode that can really help people, because one thing that I didn't appreciate was the idea of just-in-time learning. Like, I would maybe go take like a how to produce a YouTube video course. It's like, what the hell? Like, I want to make my YouTube channel in like 12 months from now. I don't need that right now. Or even if, let's say, Kieran Drew's is a good example, right? So you go and you open that. There's a lot of different modules. Well, module 7 and 8 maybe don't apply to you in that blueprint that you're working on right now. So you probably shouldn't just consume the entire course when halfway through module 1, you've got enough ideas to go take action. And when I was smiling, it was because I was writing about that. But I was also talking about books and how you should either read a book for one of two reasons and not both. And one is entertainment. So you want to read Harry Potter, maybe even a self-help book like The Cafe by the End of the World that you mentioned. Maybe you want to read that from beginning to end. For me, it was The Alchemist. That was my version of that, it sounds like. And so you want to read that because it's entertaining. But if you're reading it for knowledge, like you mentioned Alex Hormozy earlier. Let's say you're getting into the creator economy, you're starting to build a business, and you decide you want to create an offer. If you go pop open his book, $100 million Offers, or Daniel Priestley's The Entrepreneur Revolution, and let's say the first 3 chapters are about picking your ideal audience and then figuring out how to create, lead generation through email, but those are things you already know. Well, just go to the chapter you need. And those are the things that I didn't do. And since you referenced talking in threes, I'll add a third little story. A couple of years ago, I was going to meet a fellow teacher friend of mine for coffee. I was sitting in the coffee shop waiting for them. When they arrived, the first thing they said, because they know I'm a reader, and so are they said, what good books are you reading right now? And I said, I had to quit. And it was like a smoker or a drinker explaining that I'm like in recovery because I have all these things I want to do. I have way too many things I want to make now. And I have the information. I just have to go do it. And so I had to create some constraints to allow me to start taking the action steps. All 3 of those things are things that I wish I had learned sooner.
Yeah, you mentioned this concept of just-in-time learning, and the opposite of that, for the audience who might be wondering, is just-in-case learning. And I guess like so many people fall victim to that, where they and I did that myself too, where I thought, this topic sounds interesting. I think I even picked up some random course once or was it a book or course about YouTubing? Because why not learn how to create YouTube videos, right? Even though I've never really wanted to do that in the first place. But that's the idea of just in case learning. So you learn something maybe you'll need it, maybe you don't. But opposite of that is the idea of just in time learning. Like you want to learn something, you have a goal, and you pick up the resources that will bring you closer to that goal. And I think it's a nice way of like for the audience to really kind of reflect on their own kind of consumption behavior. And again, I would probably just point at myself here. Am I consuming the information that will bring me closer to my goal? Or am I just learning something, just in case? And oftentimes the answer, unfortunately, is the latter. So you need to kind of pivot a little bit and just create the right things, consume the right things, but more importantly, start creating, start acting.
It just gave me a little story idea to write. And that's that I remember when we were in college, he would kill me for telling this story, but I don't think he listens to every episode, but he's still a friend of mine to this day, also a fellow teacher. We moved away to university. We went to the same university and we ended up living together in our second year. And I'll never forget, socially at that age, you kind of tease each other and whatnot. But some friends that I played football with and I went into his room where he was sitting to tell him, come out and hang out with us, whatever. And one of them was like, dude, why the hell do you have a life jacket? So he was like a hunter and a camper and enjoyed the outdoors back home. You know, it's a little more rural. And we went to like an urban jungle to like go to classes in concrete buildings, play football. Like there's no time for recreation. But he just, I don't know, for whatever reason, brought his life jacket. It makes me think that that was such a just in case moment. Like, I don't know what he possibly in 4 years could have needed a life jacket for there, but he brought it, 500 miles from home and hung it up in the closet. And it was just there throughout university. And that's maybe a paragraph that I could put in there, a personal anecdote of like, we don't, you don't need to bring your life jacket.
Oh, I love that. It's maybe not just in case learning, but just in case acting, or just in case, yeah.
Something. It
I love
definitely
that.
falls into that just in case category that's a little bit ridiculous and outside of anything necessary. We could, go on about these topics for a really long time. I think a lot of people probably have had a lot of things that they'll take away when it comes to both writing and business. But we've pulled a lot from other people's stuff as well. I think it's kind of nice to think in a way of like, if you were going to create some course right now, free or paid or otherwise, like you would probably put some modules in there. And so, is there anything else that you would want to add, whether it comes to being a solopreneur and learning to go out on this journey on your own, or writing specifically, that we've kind of left out to this point?
I don't feel this way, to be honest. The thing that I'm a big fan of, just like you, is this idea of building in public. So, and more importantly, to share what you are learning. And basically, that is the idea of my whole writing journey. So, what I'm doing right now, and I will probably continue doing that throughout the rest of my life, is just sharing or helping other people with the stuff that I'm just learning, assuming that these people don't know about the stuff yet. And that could be the idea of how to become a solopreneur, or how do you, I don't know, write banging short form tweets, or how do you write emails. So in terms of modules, I wouldn't say that there is one specific topic that we haven't touched upon yet, because I feel like we've talked about a lot of stuff that I find curious, but I assume you do too. But yeah, other than that, it's really just the idea of sharing what I learn with all the people that decided to follow me, and hopefully kind of make an impact in their lives, so that everyone can be successful.
I think that touches on your own kind of dreams and goals. And like, do you know sort of next steps for you in terms of accomplishing that?
So in terms of next steps, and I think we've touched upon that at the beginning of the show, was the idea of leverage. So for me, that feels like the next chapter that I'm about to enter. So everything that I've done up until this point of my life was really like the whole teaching job that was like unleveraged, like there was no leverage at all. Like with the animation, it's pretty much the same. So I think now that I'm like building this writing business, and by building a writing business, I mean like I give people writer coaching. I do some ghostwriting for other writers / creators, entrepreneurs. But it feels to me that the next logical step is to build systems. I'm already doing that, but to expand on that topic of building system, and therefore build leverage, so that, well, the ultimate goal, I'm really like talking in decades now, is to have a business that kind of disconnects my time from the outcome. So I'm not like talking about money outcomes, but really the idea of that I want to spend much time with my soon-to-be wife and future kids. And this is just everything that I'm doing now and everything that I'm sharing right now and building towards is the kind of like foundation for where I want to go. And it's not tied to any money outcomes, but really just like, how can I build a business that, not just pays the bills, but provides for my family while I have lots of time to do the things that I enjoy the most.
I'm happy that it seems like you have a pretty clear kind of path and next steps to getting there. What do you find are the biggest challenges, or were challenges that you've already overcome to accomplishing this, or challenges you foresee when it comes to your roadblocks to doing this? What's been tough about it?
Two things come to mind. The first is not chasing shiny objects. But I feel like, so for people who may not know this term, shiny object is just like the idea of you being a great podcaster that you are could probably convince me of the idea, oh, maybe I should, next to writing, start like my own little podcast where I, interview other writers, how they got into writing, and that I would spend so much mental energy on that topic, which would leave me with less focus for the thing that I'm actually working on, which is building my writing business. So shiny objects would, but I got better with that. So I feel like I'm not so kind of, it's not so easy that shiny objects will actually, how do you say that, like prevent me from doing the thing that I should be doing. But the other thing, and this is like probably more difficult to work on, are just mental roadblocks. So everything that's happening in your brain that kind of tells you that what you want to do isn't so simple or isn't so easily achievable. Let me give you one specific example. The idea of asking people for their money in exchange for your service, basically. So offering people something in exchange for their money still feels, even though I have done that many times now and it has worked, but it still sometimes feels strange to me because I don't have a sales background. As a teacher, I was never really selling anything. So I'm still just learning that to, be confident in my own skills and my own services and me as a person. But that is sometimes kind of, hindering, I guess, my progress. If I was able to kind of deal with these mental roadblocks, and it's not just the idea of selling, but there are other things that kind of distract me from that a little bit, like from making progress. But as far as I can tell, I'm aware of those and I'm constantly working on them. But yeah, I guess that's something to be working on for the foreseeable future.
I feel like anyone going through a transition from sort of traditional pathway, traditional work into this world of the pathless path and sort of a more modern way of like working for yourself. We've brought Naval up earlier on the episode, and I know that one of the things he says is that the internet allows for like 7-8 billion different monopolies, and that in the future, because of robots and AI, we can all work for ourselves and then have robots working underneath us. And it'll be very few companies that have to worry about top-down human resources. And, all that's to say that we can each do our own thing, but it's a lot easier said than done. And I think that's what's so powerful about the work that you are doing, because it will inspire others. It will give others a little bit of the hints and the breadcrumbs to follow on this journey. Not necessarily a full blueprint, because everyone needs to figure it out for themselves, but it'll definitely be something that'll make a huge impact. You've referenced, obviously, being a teacher a few times. And I never really had a chance to ask. I was curious, like when you were a teacher, what did you teach? What age and grade?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the school system in Germany works a little bit differently than it does I know for a fact that it works differently than it does in the US or in Canada or in the UK. So when you decide to become a teacher, you basically pick two subjects. sorry, I have to add, when you want to become a high school teacher or a secondary school, we don't call it secondary school or high school here, but if I gave you the German name, nobody would, uh, could kind of make anything out of that. But essentially, I taught students from 7th grade to 12th grade. So what's that, like 13 years old up to 18? And I taught English. So that was my main subject. And the second subject was PE, so physical education. And the reason why I picked these two subjects was because I was always into like fitness and, just, sports, all kinds of sports. I did soccer or football. I did volleyball. I did basketball, all of that. So that's the reason why I picked PE. And English was like, my native language is German, but I was always fascinated by the language. I love speaking the language. And I just thought, yeah, why not just stick to your strengths? So that's what I did. So pick these two subjects, then study for, what was it, like 5 or 6 years. And then I was kind of able to finally get to school and, taught these two subjects for 25 lessons per week. And, then did that for a couple of years and realized, oh, shoot, I cannot imagine doing that for the rest of my life. And there we are where we started.
I think you should really, if you don't already, lean into that transition from like the language part of the transition. I think the work transition's valuable too, but I'm sure a lot of people would be inspired by the fact that you show up and write in English as well. For maybe there's a massive part of the globe who would be inspired by your story that way.
I really hope so. And let me tell you just a quick story on that note, because about a little bit more than a year ago, I thought about starting to write online. And in fact, I did. I started writing on LinkedIn. I told you earlier that I do most of my writing on Twitter or X. But there was a time, I think it was in like April of 2023, so more than a year ago, where I actually started writing on LinkedIn, but in German. So I took all the lessons that I learned from Kieran Drew and Justin Welch and Dickie Bush and so on and so forth. And I applied these lessons that I read and learned in English and thought, okay, I'm going to apply that to my native language, which is German, and just write about, self-development topics. And I wasn't into writing that much at that time, but I just realized it's not for me. For one, the one reason was I don't like, it may sound strange, right? But I like the English language better than my native language in terms of how it sounds. It just sounds better and flows better when you talk it, when you kind of speak it. But coming back to that story, I quickly decided, no, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to write in German on LinkedIn. And then it took me like a few more months of thinking about, okay, do I really want to write in a language that is not my native language? And I can tell you that I had so many self-doubts and limiting beliefs that I thought, just because this is not my native language, or just because this is not my native language, I am not allowed to write in that language. And you can tell by the fact that I'm just stumbling now, it's just so stupid to think like that. But it was really a limiting belief to me. Today, more than a year later, that I have posted something every single day, I cannot understand what I thought back then and why I thought like that back then. So if there's anyone out there listening who may not have English as their first language, I can tell you now from experience that I have met countless other writers whose native language also isn't English, and they decided to step into the game and they're crushing it. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm crushing it, but I'm quite successful now. And it just took this little decision, which I kind of bloated up, which is stupid looking back. But yeah, if there's anyone out there, I hope you find this little story encouraging.
Yeah, I see that in your future, whether it's like a free video that people can consume, or it's a paid workshop, or a little, membership, but something where you specifically help people who are trying to learn that. So you take a lot of these principles that you've learned, but specifically with that audience, you're sharing them with people who also have that story. Like, that's something I can't really do myself. I could not do because it's not true. There's no authenticity there. And I think you being able to share that authentic part of your journey would really be cool and go a long way. I do have one last thing before we kind of do the mic drop moment, a few rapid fire questions and wrap. And that's just when you were making that transition, I know how these loops open in people's minds when they listen to these episodes now, and people feel stuck. They are still getting in the car, making the commute, getting on the bus, going. They're sitting there throughout. Maybe they're consuming this on their lunch break, and there's some like stress and anxiety around listening to these, even though we're not billionaires, but like success stories, right? And thinking like, okay, well, when can I and how can I? In your case, was it the classic, like Chris Guillebeau educates people on side hustles? Was it like you started just getting some freelance contracts in animation? Like, in terms of just the very pragmatic, in the dirt version of how you made it happen, like, what did you do?
Yeah, it's a great question, because when you tell a story, when I tell my story in such a short time, people may think that the transition was like, without any friction, or that it went like from making that much as a teacher to making the same amount as an animator, and that this couldn't be further away from the truth. Because in fact, what I did was I kind of slowly faded into being a freelance animator. So my journey as an animator, and I told this story in the beginning, this is how I made my first money, and I still make money that way, was started way before, quitting my job. And it was like a year or so earlier when I talked about this also. I started, consuming content on YouTube, read books about the topic of how to animate stuff. And I was fortunate enough that like 8 months before I quit my job, I had my first client. So I made my money already as an animator while I was still teaching. And that was the sign for me, okay, this actually works. So let me double down on that. And, but also, what's also true is that I build, and I would definitely recommend this to anyone who thinks about transitioning from a quote unquote safe 9-to-5 job into a quote unquote unsafe entrepreneurial journey, is to have some sort of a financial runway. I know might be harder for some people, but I had I think it was at least 12 months, but I think it was even 24 months of my expenses saved up when I decided to quit. So I thought, even if I don't get any other client for 2 years, I could still keep the light on. And that has given me so much relief during that time of transitioning. Because in fact, in the first month was August 2022, where I was not, which was the first month of not being a teacher, I didn't get a single client. Then in September, I had one, and back then my prices were super low, so it was like, okay. And then October was another month without a client. So the transition was kind of bumpy, but the fact that I had this financial runway built before was such a great relief. So for anyone listening who thinks about the same, I can only recommend to have some form of runway build. That will make it so much easier to go about that.
Boom. Mic drop moment. I always like to ask a few rapid fire theme questions. I'm so excited to at episode 1,000 tie these all together in some cool video or something, because everyone's answered the same ones. Before I do, on all these topics or otherwise, is there anything else that you'd want to share that like you feel like we'd be leaving out if we logged off right now, or do you feel your thoughts are kind of complete?
Well, I'm excited for the rapid fire round, so I'm looking forward to what you're about to ask me. But I think just one on a general note, I think what you're doing here is great, putting or giving some people who have an interesting story to tell the mic and just letting them share their story to hopefully inspire others. So I really hope that there's at least someone in your audience who will take the things that we have talked about today or from any other episode, and that these kind of inspiration will really help them make a change in their lives. So in essence, it's just like, thank you for doing such a great job as a podcaster. I think that's what I wanted to say.
That's kind of you. I really appreciate it. Like you shared earlier, some of the heroes and mentors you learned from, I have those people in mind as well. And when I first started, there was a lot of mental blocks as well around the idea of like, oh, well, other people already have an interview show, so should I even do this? And it's a very similar simultaneous journey to what you mentioned about writing was the same for me. Now I'm excited to say with confidence, I know that each episode will help at least someone. It's not millions of downloads per episode yet, but this definitely will help some people get started in their own journeys. So equally, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Love that.
So the first one is, whether off topic or could be on topic, one thing that you are actively learning right now.
I think building systems to my, not just my business, but really just my life. So any task I see I have to do again and again, I'm trying to SOP, so to create standard operating procedures, which is super helpful for anyone who's doing repetitive tasks. So short answer is building systems.
And one piece of advice, if you were to, you said you're excited to have, your kids in the future and be able to spend time with them. You were also previously a teacher, and you're sharing a lot of your wisdom online. But if you were limited to leaving just one piece of advice for the next generation, what would that be?
I think the advice would be to not just blindly follow the path that society puts upon you, because I've seen that firsthand when I was a teacher, that, everyone, especially parents and teachers, also peer groups and friends, expected young adults to have their life figured out by the age of 18 or 19, which creates lots of pressure, right? And so I would say for the next generation, especially to young adults, that they should not, just because all their peers think that studying marketing is cool, or that you should become a teacher is cool, that they should follow their same path, but really try and figure out what they want for their lives. I guess that would be the thing, to think about what they want from their lives on their own terms, rather than just paying attention to what everyone around them does.
Beautiful. Well put. And if you were to ask me a question, I know you made the joke about not starting a podcast yet, but let's just role play for today. You get the microphone and you have an opportunity to ask me. Again, could be on these topics or completely off topic. Doesn't matter to me, but you have an opportunity to ask me a question. What's something that comes to mind?
Well, you know what? This is for the people who are just listening to that, so they cannot see the video to that. You have a helmet and the back of you. And I was wondering, because even here in Germany, I'm also a huge fan of football. So I watch American football. I know you're from Canada, but maybe you're also into American football. So I'm curious, are you still into like team sports or any particular team?
Before I answer, there's two things that I find really unique about your question. And one is, you would make a good podcaster because most people would just ask the question without, sharing and elaborating for the audio listener. And I appreciate how you did that, because a lot of times I would have to add, in case you don't know what he's talking about, there's a helmet behind me. So that was, well done. And also, most people are usually too on the spot to think of something, and they just like pull something from what we're talking about, right? Like, what would your tip for online writing be? Which is fine too. I don't care. I'm such an open book, and I just enjoy being surprised by questions. But that was a cool one. So the helmet itself is Michigan Wolverines football, national champions this year in college football in the US, the best team in the world. My uncle won a Big Ten championship there in 1978. Growing up, I had like a little baby helmet and an outfit. And then I had like a plastic helmet when I was like 10 years old. And I was always a huge diehard Michigan football fan. And that is actually what got me into playing tackle football, American football. And that's what I did at university. It paid for a lot of my school, and it was a big part of my life. I don't do that anymore. Where this ties into the stuff we're talking about is I have a lot of regrets about football. I have like 90% of it positive stuff, but the head trauma, as well as maybe more impactfully, is the fact that it's not an infinite game. And I often, like, I love golf now. I always wish I took up something like piano or guitar, or any of these creative business mediums that we're talking about, podcasting, filmmaking. All of those things are things that you can continue to improve for 100 years. And I kind of wish that I didn't spend 50 hours a week on a football field and in a locker room. That being said, there are, I can't even count on two hands all of the life lessons and the transferable skills that I learned from the sport of football. And some of my best memories are definitely from it. So I'm really grateful as well. In terms of team sports now, I took a few years off and I really did miss it. So I got back into ice hockey, or just hockey, how we call it. But for the American listeners, sometimes you got to say ice hockey for some reason. And I still do play that recreationally. It's something that I find that you can do as a team. And I appreciate just stepping out of the world of like creating and business and going to the rank and just being able to spend some time kind of de-stressing and competing a little bit in a sport and being teammates with people still. So I still do that. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. It's the same for me, not with the team sport right now, but with an individual sport. So I go to the gym. We haven't touched upon that topic. That would probably be cool material for another episode or so. But that's the way how I kind of cope with, not just with stress, but also with getting ideas, basically, and seeing so many parallels between fitness and writing, or in general, just like team sports or individual sports and writing. There's just so many benefits, but it's probably food for another episode or another time.
Absolutely. One of my little behind the scenes BTS things that I can share with fellow potential podcasters is I have different sections on the notes that I kind of keep as I talk sometimes. And one of them is episode 2, and I just jot little things down. So that's definitely been noted, and look forward to doing that. But in the meantime, to wrap this one, if people were to go find your work online, I always like asking a unique part of this. Why and where should they go to find that?
Why? Because I'm a huge fan of building in public and sharing what you learn. So I do that every single day on my Twitter account, which is at Dave Pakos, And I also love to do that in a bit of a longer form in my weekly newsletter, which I send out every Saturday. That is davepakos.com. And again, the why is just because I love learning. I'm a huge fan of learning, but also not just keeping it for myself, but sharing it with the world. And that's what I've been doing every day for months now, and looking forward to do that for really, really long time.
You mentioned the cafe by the end of the world earlier, and it made me think of the hero's journey and the guide and kind of like a storytelling thing. We can keep that for episode 2 as well in terms of elaborating. But I feel like you're already doing a good job of becoming the guide for other people and sharing some of that stuff. So I definitely hope and expect that some people will check it out. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate you. Cheers.
Boom. I can stop and let it render. It's good. I should keep that in there.